So high, just continuing the agenda introduction, and we'll go through some discussion points, and then we'll follow on with Q&A. So perhaps why don't we start off with introductions? So Rebecca, if you could start us off with just a little bit about your background, what you studied, where you studied, and how long you've been working at the firm for.
Sure, thanks, Jerry. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Sinclair, and I work at EY. I studied economics at the University of Exeter, and then I joined the EY team in the technology consulting area. I first joined while I was at university, so I did essentially an internship with them, and then I came back as a graduate in 2017. Since then, I've now moved across into the student attraction team, so kind of sharing knowledge with schools and universities about our different programs. So I can kind of talk about both sides across technology consulting and also from the recruitment side as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Sam, if you could give an introduction, please.
Yeah, so my name's Sam. I work with Rebecca in EY. My role in EY is I'm a senior consultant in technology risk. So started in technology risk just over 3 years ago now, having graduated from the University of Aberdeen, where I studied politics. And a lot of the role that I help clients with now is just to navigate all the risks involved in technology, essentially. So a lot of my role is both consulting, but I support our colleagues in assurance. So that's our audit practice, getting sort of reliance over the finances of our different clients.
Amazing. Harshita, if you could give an introduction, please. Ooh, sorry, Harshita, you're on mute.
Classic. Hi, everyone. I'm Harshita. I work at Deloitte. I have been there for the last 2 years and work in strategy and operations, specifically within the finance area. Before that, I was at the University of Surrey and I did economics and finance and graduated in 2018.
Thank you, Harshita. And last but not least, we have Ashini. If you could give an introduction, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashini. I did economics and finance at the University of Surrey. I graduated last year. So summer of last year, I did an internship with the NHS, and then I moved on into tech consulting at KPMG. And within tech, I do a bit of management consulting as well. And yeah, I handle the infrastructure, government and healthcare sector there. So yeah.
That's amazing. So thank you for the introduction. So just following on from that, I guess my first question is, why consulting? So what drew you to the field of consulting? What was your motivation to kind of pursue a career in consulting? So Harshita, maybe if you could start us off.
Yeah, so I actually, first year of uni, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So like everyone, I applied to sort of banking spring weeks, different consulting spring weeks. And I think after doing a few, so I did one at Barclays, one at UBS, I did sort of Deloitte and KPMG, and I kind of realized how much I like the variety day to day in consulting. So you can sort of change what project you do every couple of months. I like the ambiguity of it. I think I'm the kind of person that gets sort of a bit bored doing the same thing day to day. So consulting is something which really caught my eye in that sense, and also the opportunity to sort of travel. And it's not all glamorous like how people make it out to be, but it's just not being in the same location. It's nice to have a change of scenery. You get to interact with a lot of different people that maybe you wouldn't come across in your day-to-day life. So I've done sort of public sector projects, private sector projects, FS projects, so these kind of people that I wouldn't necessarily come across. So I think those are the main things that attracted me into a career in consulting.
That's amazing. Sam, if you could answer the same question, please.
Yeah, so I think my kind of journey into wanting to work in consulting was quite similar to Hashita's, in that when I was kind of thinking about what career do I want to do, a few things from chatting to different people within industries was two sort of main competencies really sort of struck out for me. So the first one was a strong business acumen, so just an understanding of basically how businesses work across a variety of sectors and industries was quite important. And the second one was technology. Now, I think most people here are actually technology-focused consultants, but to be honest, from my experience, every branch of consulting, at least within UI, so whether that be strategy, finance, restructuring, technology consulting, risk consulting, it all has a flavour of technology in it nowadays, because at the forefront of every board in the world, every C-suite, there is a question about technology and how any problem that they have, they can counter that with technology. And so that's where our solutions of technology usually come in. And so taking those two things, so a strong business acumen, a strong understanding of technology, kind of merged them both, and ended up with some sort of technology consulting. I also done an internship at one of the large UK banks in technology, believe it or not, and again, the same kind of skills and the same kind of needs kept coming out, and just from people I met there, different discussions with graduates there, I realised that development-wise, particularly the Big Four, was somewhere that really invests in its graduates. And the more I've done research into where you want to start your career, the Big Four are consistently listed in the top places to work, and just all the different things that go on to develop careers here is why I ended up where I am now.
Thank you so much for that answer, Sam. Rebecca, if you could answer the same question, please.
I think a lot of it has been covered already very well. But for me, when I was thinking about my career, I was more looking at the kind of company that I wanted to work for. So I was researching different like spring weeks and insight opportunities, and that's where I found EY. So we have a program for first year students that's now called Discover EY. So it was basically a one-day experience in the office where I could learn more about EY and the different teams and the programs. So from there, I heard about the different opportunities that there were to go on to, and that's where consulting kind of, came up as a good option for me in terms of being able to build those relationships and being able to help solve those problems for clients and have that variety in the role that Hashita was mentioning, in terms of, you get to experience different things and help clients kind of navigate different problems. And there's no typical working day or typical working week, because it can be so different what you're doing day to day. Like sometimes it might be workshops, sometimes it might be writing reports. But I think for me, it was because I'd come in early, and through that, when I was in my first year, it then meant I had more opportunities because I could try it, see that I liked it, go on to an internship, and again see that I liked it. So it was that kind of good opportunity to try different things that was great for me.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you, Rebecca. And Ashini, if you could answer the question as well, please.
Yeah, quite similar to Hashita in the sense that I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do when I started off at uni. So I did apply to quite a few banks, applied to Big Four in audit roles, but I knew from like day one that I had like a knack for numbers, and I knew I wanted an analytical role. So now when people hear consulting, they'll hear quite an advisory role. It will be advising clients whether to how to improve profitability, how to reduce their costs, stuff like that. But there's a lot of work that goes on beyond that as well. There's a lot of work that goes on to actually build those mathematical models that people then take to the client. So I was really interested in that sense of consulting, which is what I'm doing now day to day. So I think I just got really lucky with the type of role that I picked. And the reason I picked KPMG was because it gave me a lot of flexibility in terms of where I wanted to work. So I've just done a 6-month rotation in the analytics team, spent a bit of time looking at government client, working on tech implementation of their project and how that would impact their future clients and so on. So that was really interesting.
Thank you so much, Ashini. So just kind of leading on from that, so now we've kind of understood your motivation behind pursuing a career in consulting. So I guess my next question was, how did you prepare for consulting applications, specifically for the CVs, online assessments, and I think most importantly, the case interviews? They're notorious for being very ambiguous. If you could kind of just shed some light on how you went about approaching and preparing for these interviews. So I'll start with you, Ashini.
So I think with the application process, it's pretty much universal across all the consulting firms in the sense that there's 3 or 4 stages. There's probably going to be the test that you have to complete, probably going to be like an audio or a video interview. I think the more practice you get with them, the better. Especially in my case, I applied to quite a few, so I got kind of used to the format of the interviews, the tests as well. But I think in general, what they look for is if you're a good fit for the company, if your traits and your personality will fit well with their values. And because these companies have quite a high turnover rate, they want to make sure that they hire the right people. So it was a bit different for me when I went into interview. My interview was like, I don't have anything apart from your name in front of me, so you have to tell me everything about yourself. So he didn't have my CV, he didn't even know what university I went to, none of that. So I think it's really nice that they give graduates like a clean sort of slate. You start again and you kind of tell them what you've done, how you'd be a good fit for them, instead of having like a prerequisite in their mind about you and the kind of person that you are based on your CV.
Thank you for that. Hashita, if you could answer the same question as well, please.
Yeah, so in terms of preparation, I think the first stage is your CV. And for that, I actually utilized sort of people in my university network. So I would actually get sort of my friends or family to read my CV, see what I could improve, whether it was something that was like using action words, simple things like that, whether it was quantifiable, because I know that's something that they really like to see. I think even before doing the application process, it was preparing myself to apply to consulting. So figuring out whether this was actually something that I wanted to do. So just reaching out to people already within consulting on LinkedIn, sending them a simple message like, are you available to just have a chat about what you do on a day-to-day basis? And then from there, tailoring my CV to perhaps the requirements that they talked about, what they do on a day-to-day basis. And then the tests, numerical tests, just practice a lot. So I actually made a little formula sheet of basic ratio formulas, percentage formulas, just because that helped me to refer to those sort of things off the bat. And then I think for interviews, like Ashini said that it was CV blind as well. So the recruiter didn't actually have my CV either, which gives you a really clean slate to go in with. And I think the main thing that they want to see is that you can build rapport with the interviewer. So it is as much as the skills that you bring, but it's also how you interact with them. Can you build a relationship? Are you someone that they would actually want to work with. And I think consulting is such a people-based career that if you don't get along with people, it's probably not like the career for you.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you, Ashita. Rebecca, if you could go.
Perfect. So I can share a bit of insight from being in the student recruitment team as well. So at EY, we recruit what's called blind recruitment. So basically, once you've submitted your application, all of your personal details are kind of hidden from the person who's assessing you. So things like the degree you've studied, any experiences that you've had before, and also things like your gender, your ethnicity, that's all not seen by your assessor. So it's purely you and your answers and you showing your strengths in each of the stages. For us, at least as well at EY, we don't see your previous scores. So say you've reached an interview stage at the end, they're not going to see how good your numerical score was. So if you think you did less well in a particular stage, but you were successful, take that win and kind of boost your own confidence. So in terms of kind of preparing for an application, I would say, really research the company, research the team that you want to apply for. You've got a really good selection of the Big Four here, so research all of us and what makes us unique, and think about why you want to join that company and that team, and think about your strengths and what makes you good and how you can show that in the application process. And then, as has already been said, practicing the numerical tests. There's a website that I always recommend, which is called jobme.com. So jobmi.com, that's really good. And also, if you find out the assessment process of that company, you can then research advice from there. So, for example, we recruit based on strengths, and on our website under how to join us, you can see the strengths that we recruit based on. So you can make sure that you are showing them, and you can think about how you can show them. And also we recruit using CAP. So they're the company that design our application process. So CAP also provide practice tests. So we'll definitely look up the process of the company and practice based on that process would be my advice.
That's amazing. Guys, make sure you're writing that down. Exclusives. Sam, if you could answer the same question.
Yeah, I think Rebecca's kind of stole all the EY insights from me there. But quite interestingly, actually, the notebook I'm using today was an old one that I used in uni, and I've not used it since uni. And the last page I'd written on was from my EY Assessment Centre, which must have been about 4 years ago. So I thought that was quite funny to come across that today. And I think builds into probably the most important point, which is do your research. So research which firms you'd want to work for, why you want to work for them. Find out if you're applying to a location, don't kind of blindly apply for a location because your friends are going there. Like, really think about, what will this location do for me? How will it further my career? And really think about what you're applying for and try and understand that fully. So I've been lucky enough to sit in on final interviews. So my partner's quite inclusive and likes having people more junior in the team to sit in on final interviews. So I've interviewed a few people who have joined us. And I think probably the best advice I can give from that is know the role. And be yourself. Two parts, sorry. So know the role, like really have a good understanding of what do we actually do on a day-to-day basis. And that's quite easy for me to say because I do it. But things like attending events like this is a great start. Doing your research beforehand, reaching out to your uni career service. Obviously things are complicated by COVID and there's not many sit-in events, but I know EY, we're doing loads of events virtually this year to support candidates. And your uni career service should make you aware of that. So understand the role through things like this, and also be yourself through the process. So there's a horrible sort of preconception that we hire a certain type of people, and it's just not the case at all, really. So we really want the most diverse team possible, and think of that as widely as you can. So diversity of thought, diversity of skills, diversity of background, ethnicity, gender. The law. We see it as the more diverse a team, the stronger that team is. It brings different opinions. And in our work, we see our high performing teams are the ones that are most diverse. And with that, we want to see that diversity come through in applications. So make sure you are yourself. Even the not so great parts of yourself. Some of the partner group I know for a fact like to know what your kind of weaknesses are to work out how that will fit into the teams. And we don't really see it as weaknesses. We see it as things that you can improve on and really bring out your strengths. So yeah, as I said, to sort of summarise there, my main piece of advice would be research, be prepared, and be yourself.
Thank you, Sam. That was a very thoughtful answer. And I actually wanted to follow up on something that you said, that you mentioned that you were lucky enough to sit in some interviews, and maybe Hashita and Rebecca, you can add to this. So when conducting interviews for graduates and interns or placement students, what sort of candidate did you go for? Can you maybe give an example of when you came across a really great candidate, and what did that candidate do to kind of impress you? Sam, if you could answer that first.
Yeah. So one of the candidates that really sticks out in my mind was actually a business apprentice. So was actually still at school. And on this day, this was actually part of our assessment centre. There's a one-on-one interview step in that. So I'd met maybe 4 or 5 people that day. I think this was the last candidate I had. And the way he approached the questions that I was asking really, really impressed me, to the extent that afterwards I went to someone on Rebecca's team and asked to flag how impressive they were. Because most people kind of approach things in a fairly similar way. And again, this comes with the whole sort of diversity of thought. And just the way he approached that question was just completely different from everyone else had done it. And I just found it really interesting how he never got the answer wrong. And in fact, he made me think about the question differently than I had with any of the previous candidates. And to give you an insight about what he actually asked me, the way he answered it was he structured his answer in a really analytical way. So most people came at the question in a kind of quite a holistic way, but he was really analytical and had actually drawn a table on how he was going to answer the question. And I could see him working from this table, and I just thought that was really impressive. And so that's one that really stuck out for me. So again, I think that's a situation where it kind of goes to show that although we probably have the same interview questions, the way you can approach that and the way you can bring out your own personality and the way that you approach questions can be massively different from other people. And that should be something that I think at EY we celebrate and recognise as a strength.
Thank you, Sam. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Becca or Ashini or Hashita?
I can share one of my experiences. So I was assessing, it was also an apprentice, so maybe there's a sign there, but an apprentice, and I was interviewing her for one of the exercises in our assessment centre. And one of the exercises last year was you had to read different activities and basically choose what you would get involved in. And it's one of those exercises where there's not necessarily a right and wrong answer. It's much more around your thought process and how you communicate that thought process. And the way that she was communicating was really clear to me, even though she didn't have necessarily she didn't have like work experience or anything along those lines. She was just communicating her thoughts really well, and that's something that stands out to me. And it's one of the best ways that you can prepare is to practice conveying your thoughts, practice conveying what you think about something. And especially for virtual assessments, I know for us at least we're fully virtual, and I imagine every company will be fully virtual at the moment. Get really familiar with talking over webcam. It's very strange, especially for an interview, not being able to be there in person and build that rapport. It is something that you have to practice. So set yourself up where you would be for your interview, practice getting your webcam on, see what you look like, see what's behind you, make sure it's not going to distract you and that you look quite clear on your camera, and then practice introducing yourself. Think about a problem in society or an idea that you've got and practice talking about that, and see how you sound. Do you sound like you're talking clearly? Is what you're intending to get across what you're taking from your recording? And just practice that a few times until you feel really comfortable to go into your interview.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I just want to say the question Rebecca was talking about was the same question that I had. So that must just be a good one to really reveal the way they approach things.
Thank you for that, Sam. Does Ashita or Ashini have anything to add to that?
I'd just say that I know when I went in for my interview, and I found this out much later, what they have in front of them, the interviewer, is a list of all the company's core values and competencies. And it's basically just like a tick list. So when you're talking about your experience, when you're talking about your previous work experience or even your degree or your dissertation, they'll tick off values they think you've demonstrated. So, for example, integrity, teamwork, relationship building, stuff like that.
Thank you so much, Ashini. And Ashita, if you could answer the same question, please.
Yeah, so I think most of the things have been covered, but I haven't done any interviews, but I do sort of mock interviews with some of the people that I mentor. And one of the main things is you can have no experience, but I think like Rebecca said, it's being able to convey that confidently. So I know that one of the girls, she has sort of no experience within consulting, but the way that she brought in her part-time jobs or her volunteering experience and then sort of put it in a way that it links to the core consulting skill set was really impressive. So I think don't underestimate the experience you have with university societies or volunteering work or any extracurricular activities, because it will all fit into the consulting career that you are applying to, want to do.
That's amazing. I'd just like to follow up on that. How do you kind of find the balance between not trying to oversell your experience and packaging it in a nice way? How do you find that right balance between, let's say you have retail experience, you don't want to oversell yourself. At the end of the day, it is retail experience. Well, how do you kind of present that in a great way?
I mean, sorry to jump in there, but I wouldn't. I think the issues. So I worked in retail a bit when I was at university, and the issues that I'd face with customers are the same issues I face with clients. And ultimately, like I wouldn't discount any of those experiences as not being as important as what we do now. I think obviously if you've got 5 years of consulting experience under your belt, great. But the chances of people having that before applying for anything, it's unlikely. So as Rebecca mentioned earlier, is at EY we hire on strengths. And one of the ways I actually prepared for interviews was found EY strengths and thought about all the different aspects of my life and how I demonstrated those strengths and what I was good at. So that was things like part-time work, university studies, any volunteering, sports I played at uni, and how those strengths came out. And I don't think that I don't think you really can overplay it too much unless you're saying like you should be in tech consulting because you revamped an entire, I don't know, stores IT system. Maybe that's overplaying your hand a bit. But the core values, the core strengths that we use day to day, you will use them. You will demonstrate them in things that you do. So I wouldn't underestimate the power of that. And it can sound, I can understand why it can sound to you guys as maybe I am overplaying. I play hockey twice a week. is that really teamwork? But really it is, and that's where you work out your passions and you work out what you're good at is through these sort of formative years at uni. So I'd say never discount those and always use those to your advantage.
Thank you, Sam. Ashita, Ashini, Rebecca, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I couldn't have put it any better myself.
I think Sam's covered that very well.
That's perfect. So yeah, just kind of following on from that. So given the current climate, we know that where COVID-19 has had an impact on the job market and it's more competitive than ever. And consulting probably was very competitive before COVID-19. So essentially what my question is, how would you advise students at universities really kind of develop skills and stand out as candidates right now? What should they be kind of involving themselves in at the moment to be prepared for internships or placements or graduate schemes applications? Ashita, if you could start us off with that, please.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is starting early. So if you're in first year now, make sure you start applying to sort of the spring week. So I know Deloitte do spring into Deloitte. Rebecca mentioned EY do a discovery day. So just start researching firms early and just figuring out what you want to do, because within consulting, there's also so much you can do. So I sit within strategy and operations, which is sort of back office finance processes, tech implementations, all that kind of stuff. But of course, until you research, you won't know what you actually want to do. And then after, I'd say learn a skill of some sort. So for example, there's now a big demand for consultants who can do data analytics. So I'd go on to say Coursera or Udemy and I'd do some sort of course. So maybe a Python course or a Tableau course, something like that, just to upskill your CV. And then I think the third thing is get some experience. So of course, if you're in first year, you would be applying to spring weeks. But even if I know there's a lot of student-run consultancies at the moment. So there's something like the Young Consultant, which is sort of pro bono consulting, but it is a good way for you to get an idea as to how consulting projects are run and how you can develop your skill set in order to then apply to be a consultant at one of these firms. So I think really find out what you want to do, build up on a skill, and then get some experience.
That's a very insightful answer. Rebecca, if you could answer the same question, please.
I definitely agree with lots that Ashita has said in terms of, research different companies, find as many opportunities as you can and research that company, research their culture, their values. Is it somewhere that you want to work? Is it somewhere that you can see yourself working in the future? And then, narrow it down into a reasonable amount of applications that you can actually apply so that you really can give your role to the application. There's no point doing 200 if you're doing them really quickly late at night and then none of them are successful. You want to really pick a few that you're interested in and then really go for them. Definitely practice as much as you can. As I mentioned earlier, practice all the different stages as you meet them. And I'd also recommend, which goes alongside research, kind of thinking outside of the box. We get lots and lots and lots of applications for our business consulting team in London, and there just aren't, it is a big team, but there aren't that many roles. It is very oversubscribed. So think about other areas of consulting that you are interested in, which comes from that research. And the more you learn, you might find a different team might be right for you. It might be, Sam's technology risk team. It might be the actuarial team if you love numbers, or it might be like a risk team. So research as much as you can and really know that is the exact team that you want to work for, and then give your all to the process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Ashini, if you could answer the same question.
Yeah, everything that Rebecca and Harshita already covered, but I think don't underestimate the power of networking here as well. That can really, really help you get that initial internship, which then counts towards any work experience when you're applying to, these consultancy firms or like the Big Four. So yeah, even, you know, it doesn't have to be something, doesn't have to be at like a Big Four consultancy or any of the other banks or anything like that. Even if you find like a small finance department, for example, if you're interested in finance, smaller finance department at your local, can't really think of any examples right now, but like maybe like a local hospital finance department, or a local construction company finance department, if you're interested in that kind of stuff. That really adds to the sort of knowledge that you have on finance, on the sort of sector in general, and it kind of gives you a bit more to talk about in your interview.
I liked something that you said. You said that we should try and leverage our network, and I was just going to kind of follow up on that. How would you? What are some practical tips for people to kind of approach networking? Because that kind of feels like a buzzword, and as someone who's almost like an introvert as myself, I feel that's something that I don't really want to do. So could you maybe give your experience with networking and how that's helped you, and how we should kind of approach networking?
I'd say, so right now, Surrey and Business Society, and even all the other related societies, you have Econ and Finance Society, there's, I believe there's a Trading Society as well. All of these, you're doing similar courses, you have, all of these are like-minded individuals. So they're a part of your network. It doesn't have to be somewhere outside of Surrey, it doesn't have to be someone who's already working. Your network gives you access to a bigger network. They might know some people. They'll be, oh, my uncle works here, maybe you could talk to him, vice versa. So really, the whole point of networking is to find like-minded people, people who want to apply to the same stuff, people who are doing similar courses, and really talk to them about what you want to get out of either an internship or either a grad role. And just take it from there.
It's a really amazing answer. Thank you so much, Ashini. Sam, do you have anything to add to the initial question or the follow-up question as well?
Yeah, probably just to the follow-up one. It's just to kind of echo what Ashini said there. I think what was really valuable for me was two things. So, as Ashini said, if you're part of a society or a sports team, I remember when I was applying for things, I spoke to people who I'd played hockey with, who had went on to graduate and worked in different places, and they were a good protocol to answer kind of questions about the application process and give me some advice to that side. Friends and friends' parents, bizarrely, a couple of my friends' parents were on hand to discuss. They work in the industry, and they were on hand to discuss things about applications and give some advice. And lastly, I know it wasn't as big a thing when I was around, but luckily I managed to get one. But mentorship. So I know a lot of university career services have alumni mentor groups now where you can find a mentor. And when I was at university, our university done that as well. And I think I kind of lucked out a bit because I actually got an executive director at one of the UK's largest banks. So I lucked out a wee bit on that one. But I mean, I know other people who had mentorships, and my mentor was really busy, and I just kind of was able to see him when he popped up to Edinburgh for work meetings and stuff. But he was really fantastic in giving me advice on how to narrow down applications, where to work for, sort of helping me. He walked through presentations and stuff before interviews, and really helped that way. And quite funny actually. The day before my final interview for EY, he gave me a call just to see how I was like preparing for it and stuff, and had actually just been out for lunch with our managing partner. So that put things in a bit of perspective, which was quite funny. But yeah, I'd use mentorship schemes if they're available to you.
Thank you so much, Sam. So before we go into Q&A, I just wanted to ask Rebecca a question. So you mentioned that you started off in tech consulting. I was just really interested in why did you make the pivot from consulting to student advisory? And maybe if you could shed some light on that. I'm just really interested to kind of hear a bit.
That is a great question. So for me, it was a opportunity that came up. So at EY, we can choose to take secondments, and different secondment opportunities come up. Some of them are more formally part of your program. So during the graduate program, we had a 6-month opportunity to formally second. And for that, I went to one of the sector teams, and leading on from the networking conversation, that was actually with someone that I met from my internship, and we had a partner breakfast, and the partner there was the one running the secondment. And so I emailed him again. I said, oh, I'm back as an opportunity. So that's how I took that secondment. So I would say networking can bring you really good opportunities. But in terms of the move into student then, so I saw another secondment come through, and it was offering a 6-month role in the student attraction team, and it had a bit of a detail about the role description, building relationships, sharing your knowledge about EY. And if you can't tell already, I'm a big fan of EY. I've been here for a number of years and I love it very much. Yes, got the merch as well. So for me, it looked like the perfect role. I love building relationships, I love talking to people, and I thought 6 months, let's try it. And that was about 1.5 years ago. So I did the 6 months secondment, and then I had the choice between the two teams, and I'd really enjoyed the 6 months, so I decided to stay. I'm still very close to my tech consulting team. I often get them to come out to events, and I thoroughly enjoyed working in that team. But one of the things about big companies is there are lots of opportunities to try things, whether it's permanently or temporarily, and see where your strengths and your skills draw you to, and that might be in the UK, or it might even be an international opportunity. So my advice is always, consider opportunities and say yes if you are interested.
And Rebecca forgot to mention she got to work with me a bit when she'd done the secondment.
Yes, so the
main sales factor.
My secondment, so I was based in London before, and the secondment opportunity was to Edinburgh. So it meant I got to experience a new EY office and work with the wonderful Sam for 6 months. And I now look after the South region. So University of Surrey is actually one of the universities that I work with. So we'll be back for the careers fair coming up soon. So if I see you again there, please do let me know that you met me here as well.
Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. So guys, if you have any question, please make sure to utilize the YouTube comment section, and I'll make sure to put it forward to our guest speakers. So we have a question here from Aruj, and he asked, or she asked, sorry, I'm not too sure. How do you practice for interviews? So I'm assuming case interviews specifically. Harshita, if you want to start us off with that one.
Yeah, so I think specifically for case interviews, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. So just type in any sort of consultancy. So I know BCG have quite a few case study interviews on YouTube. So just type in BCG case study, and it's like a good 30-minute video of what an interview could look like in terms of a case. And I think market sizing questions are quite common. So I don't think they're common for the Big Four, but if you're applying to other consulting firms, market sizing is basically say, how big do you think the contact lens market is in the UK? So to practice something like that, it would just be sort of have a conversation with one of your family members, discuss the question. There's a lot of resources online where you can look through sample answers. But in terms of the sort of interviews that we have at the Big Four, I think a lot of it is your competency, your strengths. Use that STAR technique, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is situation, task, action, result, I think. So yeah, practice that. Make sure that you phrase your questions using that method, just because it's very clear to the interviewer what exactly you're saying. Yeah, I think the main thing is practice. So use your family members, your friends, practice with them. The better you are at conveying what you want to say, the better the interview will.
Thank you so much, Harshita. Rebecca, if you want to answer the same question.
I was hoping you'd go to me next. I would absolutely agree with what Harshita said, and in terms of how to actually go about practicing that. So something that I did for my interview, because mine was a face-to-face interview, was I practiced, I had a practice interview with a family friend. So I found some example questions online and I printed those out and I gave them to her, and we had a practice interview, and she kind of gave me feedback on how I spoke and also my kind of mannerisms. So one of the things that she picked up on, which I'm sure I still do now because it is a trait I have, is when I think I tend to kind of look up. And her advice was, that's absolutely fine. Take a moment to think about what you're going to say, but then, bring it back to the person. And that goes the same for video interviews as well. I often see a lot of people in interviews that are talking and they're kind of looking around and they're thinking. And absolutely, if you need to take a minute to think, do so. If you need 5 seconds, 10 seconds, it'll feel like a lifetime to you, but to the interviewer, it's not. So practice that. Try and get someone that you're not familiar with, so you do feel maybe nerves if you're someone that gets nervous like me in interviews. Get in that unfamiliar environment and put yourself out of your comfort zone. And as I mentioned earlier, you can practice the virtual ones, record yourself, see how you look. Are you looking kind of towards the screen? Are you nice and focused on what you're saying, and are you talking fluently and conveying your thoughts really well?
Amazing. Thank you so much. Ashini?
Yeah, just to add to that. So most of these interviews will ask you competency-based questions. So for example, like tell me about a time when you've showed time management skills, for example. So there's quite a comprehensive list of these competency-based questions available online. I think I myself have like 200, or I have a list of like 200 questions that I found someone did. Picked out like the top 20 most common ones, and sort of a weekend before my interview wrote down 2 examples for each question. So 2 examples of a time that I showed time management skills. One that I actually say in the interview, and then one for backup in case I used up that example somewhere else. So I think that technique really helped me. And again, utilize your network, practice with your friends, practice with your family, your family as well. Like your parents must have done some kind of interviews in their life. So they would know, they've experienced it. Even if it's your first interview, they'd be able to guide you with what to do, what not to do. And they'll give you an honest opinion about, what you come across as, maintain eye contact, confidence, all of that.
Amazing, thank you. And Sam?
Yeah, I think these guys have covered it pretty well, but just prepare as much as you can, get in any practice that you can, and I mean, in the interview itself, try and relax as much as you can. I know from the ones I've sat in on, we're not trying to catch you out, and I think there's some people have a tendency to think, have I answered enough? But a lot of the questions that we ask are just really to get to know you. So don't kind of feel like you have to answer more. Just be as natural as you can.
Amazing, thank you, Sam. And I'm just going to follow up on, I think, I've seen a general pattern from your answers, and you mentioned something about using the STAR method and being structured with your answers. I was just wondering, how do you, because oftentimes these answers can be very, very structured where it doesn't seem authentic. How do we go about kind of crafting our own story and making it kind of unique in a sense where it kind of differentiates us from different candidates? Rebecca or Harshita, anyone?
I can go first with that one. So my advice would be try, make sure you're prepared and prepare yourself well, but don't over prepare. Don't write yourself a script that you're going to say for the answers. Think about the key points that you want to get across, the key strengths that you want to show, and kind of the couple of bullet points that you might want to touch upon. But if you think about it in at an in-person event, you wouldn't be able to turn up with a script, and the same as a virtual interview, they're going to be able to see if you're reading off a script. So just try and think about in general in terms of the points that you want to cover, and then in the actual interview itself it will sound quite natural.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Does anyone else have anything? Hashita, if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, so no, I completely echo Rebecca. Do not over prepare. I think especially with virtual interviews, it's so easy for you to have all your notes in the background, and you can tell when someone's reading off their notes. So say you get asked a question and you prepared the STAR technique with it, and you can see yourself reading it, and it's like, if you don't know exactly where you've stuck up that post-it note, you're going to panic, and you're probably going to do a worse job if you didn't prepare in the first place. So I think keep it natural, have everything in the back of your mind, but don't have it in front of you. Like I often say, don't actually have any notes in front of you at all, because it detracts from what's already in your head. Because it's the same as revising, right? When you have a uni exam, you think you don't know anything the night before, and then you get into an exam and suddenly everything just sort of, you can just write what you remember. So in that way, don't have your notes up in front of you, I think.
Very insightful answer. Thank you. So I think I'll move on to the next question. So we actually have a question here. It says, is it worth going on a placement year, or is a summer job with a company from the sector more valuable? Rebecca, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I guess it depends on your personal preference in terms of the kind of sector that you are looking to go into. I would highly recommend the first year programs, because it gives you that chance to see the company close, to get to know the company and see if it is the right kind of environment for you. And then I know for us, I'm sure for others, you're very likely to be fast tracked onto the next year's program. So it takes away that pressure. I know that when I was in my final year of university and in my second year, I already had that offer for the internship and then the offer for the graduate scheme, because I'd come through the Discovery Y first year program, and I knew that it was the right place for me, and I had that offer, so I didn't apply anywhere else because I'd found what I wanted. So it does take that pressure away. And as I mentioned, our recruitment process is blind, so you don't need to have had work experience, you don't need to have had some relevant experience in advance in order to join us. So unless this other sector or the similar sector is what you think you might want to go into, then I would say, think about where you see yourself as a graduate and see if they have any early opportunities for you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm actually going to move on to the next question. So the next question says, I think this is for Rebecca and Sam. Is it possible to apply to EY for placement even after failing the questions? I'm not too sure what that means.
So I'll take that as if you've already failed the application process. So we have a 6-month policy in place. So if you've applied and you've been unsuccessful, then you can reapply 6 months after when you get that notification. And there will likely still be roles in 6 months' time, not in the, some of the teams will have closed, which is why I recommend to apply early. But if the role is still there, then you're welcome to reapply or apply to something different. If you have failed a previous year, so say you applied in the summer for one of the 2020 roles and you were unsuccessful, then you're welcome to reapply now for a role next year. And I'd say learn from that application, whether it was for the same company or a different company. Think about where you might have been less successful in the process. Are there areas that you could practice? Are there areas that you could grow more confident in, so that when you go to your next application, whether it's the same company or somewhere else, you've learned from your experience, and that can kind of drive you forwards. And maybe it was the numerical test, or maybe it was the interview, and you've learned from that experience, and you can now use that in the future.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to move to the next question. So we have a really thoughtful question here. So it says, how do you think the pandemic has affected the operational side of brick and mortar firms? And do you feel these companies have been compelled to reshape their business and operating models using technology? It's a pretty lengthy question, but Sam, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I can try to tackle this. So, I mean, thinking of the day-to-day role, a lot of our time is spent on site with clients, and obviously, given the fact everything's virtual, that's changed. So, I actually had a meeting today, and since the pandemic began, EY has saved US $1 billion on travel costs, which obviously you might think, okay, well, let's just not bother travel because obviously that just comes out revenue. But the feeling amongst the partner group, and I think most people, is that where possible, we'd quite like to get back to seeing our clients in person again. And we think clients prefer that as well. So I think, I mean, we have been forced to change. EY kind of naturally has always been really flexible with working, so we've always been able to work from home. So there wasn't that huge a shift when the pandemic started. It was more just take your laptop home and work as you would normally at home. I think the big difference for us was the meeting the clients, and we have to do all that virtually, as I said. But going forward, I think there will be more virtual interaction using technology, but the urge to still see clients in person hasn't gone away, and I don't think it will go away because we value the relationships you can build in person. So you can get that. In terms of updating business and operating models, I think bizarrely, so at the beginning there was a bit of uncertainty. How's this pandemic going to work? What's going to change? What we're kind of seeing now more is that clients have for years maybe identified things that they want to do. Most of those things have a technology back into it, and COVID has either made it a necessity to happen or has accelerated plans to that to happen. So in terms of how our business operates, don't want to speak for the other guys here, but EY have actually probably seen an uptick in demand for our services. Our clients look to us in times of uncertainty, look to us to support them with things that are causing them problems. And so this pandemic has kind of just cemented our position as sort of trusted advisors to clients, no matter what may come down the pipeline to them. And I think these guys as well, we're quite proud of the work that we've done with both clients from a sort of corporate side. So we work with some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies, but a whole range of companies, all the industries you can think of, have had challenges, and it's been really nice for us to really see our work go into practice and add value to those clients. But also the work that we've done with governments over the past few months to support things like the Nightingale hospitals was supported by EY. So and people from my own team were seconded to support the NHS in that. And I think it really sort of showed the values that we can add to client, and to get the EY tagline in, it was nice for us to live up to our purpose of building a better working world.
Thank you so much for that, Sam. Harshita, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so the pandemics, of course, I think it's acted like a catalyst more in the sense that a lot of the clients that we work with were thinking about technology, upgrading their processes, even prior to the pandemic. But what this has done is that it's forced them to do it quickly. And one of the public sector clients that I've been working with, their recruitment operating model, everything was on site, face to face, and now they've suddenly had to figure out how to make everything virtual. So virtual assessment centres, virtual interviews, which sounds simple enough, but a lot of public sector clients don't have that existing technology. Like Department of Education got Wi-Fi in 2017, so they're a lot sort of behind the curve as compared to the big four or sort of tech companies, right? So the change that we're seeing with them is obviously more drastic, and even firms in retail such as M&S or Ocado, the changes that they made over the last few months in their own operating models has been sort of drastic.
Thank you so much. Rebecca, would you like to answer that question?
I think Sam covered it very well from an EY perspective. But I know in my team, in student recruitment, we had about, I think, 2 working days notice to change our assessment centre and make it virtual. I think the news, so our global CEO announced about a week or so before the government that we had quite strict limitations and like capacity numbers and where we could work to make sure that everyone was safe, both internally and externally. And I think that news came on something like the Thursday, and then we had an assessment centre on the Tuesday. So it was a very tight turnaround to kind of transform that and make it online. But that's, you know, what we had to do to make sure that everyone, you know, well-being was looked after. And I know that in our team and many others, and I'm sure many other companies as well, we were very strong in terms of the virtual interaction, and probably more so even than when we were in the office. You know, we had things like well-being sessions, and we had a slot where we just took a break and we all put like a face mask on, and we just took 10 minutes to take a minute away from our busy work. And I think things like that are actually the kind of positive aspects that have come from working virtually, that we had to think, you know, how can we engage, how can we interact with people who are now spread out across the UK, and people might be working in difficult environments. They might not actually have a desk at the moment to work at. They might have other people in their household that are also on calls or learning, or children. So I think it definitely made me appreciate like my team and having that environment to work in.
Amazing, thank you. And Ashini?
Yeah, definitely what Harshita said about the pandemic acting as a catalyst that has kind of forced a lot of our clients to restructure. And it's kind of forced KPMG to restructure in the sense that connected consulting is now more prominent than ever, you know, working in more creative and agile ways across teams, across sectors is now way more normal than it was before. And that, you know, is quite a positive thing that's come out of from the pandemic and from the restructuring.
Thank you so much for that, Ashini. So the next question here we have is from Fraser, who asks, at what point during university would you suggest applying for short-term internships and spring weeks? Is it advisable to do this in your first year? Rebecca, if you'd like to start us off with that one.
Sure. I would say as early as you can would be very recommended. So if you are in your first year, you know, start thinking about where you want to work, start researching different companies. You're obviously interested in consulting to be here today. So have a look at, you know, the different companies, big companies and small companies, and see what different opportunities they have for you. And then when you are ready, you know, apply as early as you can to give yourself that best shot of being at the kind of top list of the applications. You know, we want to go through and review everyone's application. So if you wait until February time to apply, you know, you've got a long way to go through to be assessed and to be looked at. So as early as possible would be my recommendation.
Nice one. Thank you so much. Maybe Ashini and Harshita, maybe if you could, if you could shed some light on when you started your applications for grad schemes, how early did you start, and what was your approach for, let's say, your final year? Ashini, if you want to take that one.
So I applied for spring weeks, and it kind of was like a trial and error process because didn't really receive that much guidance from the university it's kind of a very proactive process when you get to uni. So I did spring weeks. I think I applied just before the deadline, so it was obviously too late. A lot of the roles were already gone. Same for summer internships. I think early. So what I did when I got to final year for my grad jobs is sign up for the notifications. So for example, for EY or KPMG when I was applying, you guys have a process. I think EY have a process in place where they'll notify you when your preferred grad scheme application opens. So you're prepared. And I think if they open like sometime in September or October, you know that you have all of August to get your CV ready, start drafting a couple of cover letters, all of that, and then as soon as they open, just apply like that day or that weekend, as early as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And Harshita?
Yeah, so agree with what Ashini said. I think I started applying for spring weeks in my first year. That's because I had the awareness from some of my cousins or family members. But I know when you start university, a lot of the time that awareness comes sort of second year. So again, start applying early. But I think second year when summer internships applications open, that is the main time where you should start applying, September, October, because those summer internships can often help you convert into a grad scheme, and it takes so much pressure off final year because then you can literally focus on that 60-70% or whatever your course is worth, which is so important. And I think that's what I did. So I did the summer internship with Deloitte and then did like a 1-round sort of conversion interview and then got into the grad scheme. So it took sort of pressure off the entire final year, which is really good.
That's some great advice. Thank you so much. So I'm a bit weary of time, so we'll end on this question. So we have a question here from Abhishek who says, how do you all strike the right work-life balance? And the lines generally blurred whilst working from home. So Sam, if you want to start us off with that one.
A very, very good question. I mean, to be perfect, it's very, very difficult to get work-life balance. I think, especially when you start, there's a sort of, I mean, we work in the type of place there's always something to do. If you need work, we will find work for you. And so it's quite difficult to put those sort of barriers in place to prevent work overtaking your life. I think good things to do is let your team know your kind of non-negotiables when you start. As a senior, I kind of lead teams now and manage different engagements. And just by practice, I'll ask my team when we start engagements, what is there any times that you can't work? Just let me know. And I know a lot of the engagements I've been on previously, we went on client site, we put up a whiteboard and wrote up our non-negotiables. So for some people, it's they need to be able to play sports on a Thursday night, maybe something like that. So it's just making sure your team know that. I think that's really important advice. As to working from home, yes, I think it's made it more difficult. One of the fun things you used to be able to do in the office was lock your laptop away, and it was almost out of sight, out of mind. But now I'm particularly bad at it. People, I'm probably the worst to ask about work-life balance, but I work with teams around the world, so things are still happening when I'm asleep and when I'm doing dinner and stuff like that. So I've got a really bad habit of kind of having dinner and stuff and then going back onto the laptop and see what else has come through. Would advise against it, but I mean, I say I'm bad at it, but it is perfectly possible to have a work-life balance. Big tip is just to put a private meeting in your diary from 6 o'clock every night, and that usually stops a lot of problems.
Thank you for that, Sam. Rebecca, do you want to answer that as well?
Yeah, I do agree with Sam. It's a difficult balance, and I feel like it's very rare at any point in your career to think, yeah, I've absolutely nailed this work-life balance, because it is a balance, and sometimes it'll be more personal life and sometimes it'll be more work life. I think something that I have started doing, I've recently joined EY Mindfulness Network, and I've had my first session, which was learning around, being mindful, being present in the moment, and practicing that switching off, because I'm one of the people where I'll finish my work for the day, whatever time that was, and then I'll continue thinking about it, and I'll lie in bed and be like, oh, I've got to do that tomorrow. And I have to start learning to be like, no, you've got to switch off. Like, work is not your life. Like, consulting, we're not saving lives, we're not actually dealing with life and death decisions. At least I know that I can't speak for everyone, but if I a lot of the time, if I haven't made a decision that day, if I haven't replied to an email that night, the world is not going to end. So I think for that, it was kind of recognizing, this is what I need to get through today. And if I'm not looking to get through that, either understanding, okay, I'm going to work late tonight, and then I'm going to maybe start a bit later tomorrow if I can, or I'm going to finish a bit later on Friday if I can, or flagging it and managing expectations and saying, it's 4 o'clock now. This is the things that I've still got left to do today. Can you let me know, how many of these are actually urgently needed today? It might be like, oh, I just said an arbitrary deadline of tomorrow. It's not urgent for tomorrow. So I think communicating, managing expectations, and kind of not being too hard on yourself. And it is difficult to get a work-life balance, and working from home, like Sam said, work is right next to you. It might even be in the same room that you sleep in, depending on your setup. So, learning that you need to switch off. It's important to switch off for your well-being.
Amazing answer. Thank you, Rebecca. Ashini?
Yeah, pretty much the same. So I study, sleep in, and work in the same room. So the boundaries are definitely blurring 6 months in. But I think what KPMG have done is asked us to flex our work hours within the 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. window. So if you want to start a bit early at 8 and then finish at 4, that's fine too. If you want to start at 10, finish at 6, that's absolutely fine as well. So that kind of has really helped a lot of people sort of, switch off in the evening and try something else. There's quite a lot of sessions available now, virtual. So we'll do like a cocktail making class at lunch, or like a yoga session, and that kind of helps people take a lot of breaks. I know I struggle with that because you really miss a social aspect to work. You don't have your friends saying, okay, do you want to go for a quick coffee? So you'll just sit at your screen for like 2-3 hours straight without realizing. So yeah, definitely trying to get better at it.
Thank you for that, Ashini. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to Sam, Rebecca, Heshita, and Ashini for your really, really thoughtful answers. I've personally taken a lot from this session. I personally found it very interesting and insightful, and I'm sure everyone else did as well. And for all the attendees on this call, yeah, please make sure to kind of register. Go on Surrey Business Society's website and register as a member. We have a lot of great sessions coming up. So register so you are in line with what we have coming up. And yeah, thank you for attending this event, and I hope you took something from it. And thank you, guys.